to hear from Catherinne Puentes, who has supported the CRPD Committee for 9 years and has worked with other UN committees as well, notably the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Families, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Catherinne has also joined country visits with the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture and worked with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights at the country level, where she started promoting the ratification of the CRDP in her country of origin and the recognition and participation of disabled people and their organisations in the mainstream human rights movement. Prior to joining the United Nations, Catherinne was working with the Constitutional Court of Colombia, the National Human Rights Institution, and civil society human rights organisations, where she gained her first professional experience as a human rights lawyer and promoted the process called London, Cartagena, Bogota, aimed at promoting international cooperation compatible with human rights in her country. What an amazing set of experience there. Catherinne, are you with us?
Good evening, Marta. Yes, I'm here.
Brilliant, brilliant. So our first question is, what has changed as a direct result of the convention? But also, what would you say are its limitations? And you've got about 5 minutes for that.
Thank you so much, and really thank you to all of you for this invitation, for this opportunity to be this evening with organizations of deaf persons and other organizations of civil society in England. I think that I would like to share with you 7 points of what I think it has changed in the last years since the convention was adopted. And I think one of these, Tara already mentioned it, is that now there is a legal and policy framework at the international level. And this legal and international framework has been agreed by the majority of member states of the United Nations. So there is really a world agreement of 184 member states that have become states parties to the convention. And what does it mean? What has changed and what does it mean? That different countries with different legal, cultural systems, geographical regions have agreed to commit themselves to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the rights that the Convention enshrines, and the spirit of the Convention. So the second point for me is that now the situation, and this is also in connection with Tara was explaining, that not anymore it is about the goodwill of a government or a program of a law government to work to make a reality the rights of persons with disabilities. So it is just that change from the charity model and charity approach to be an obligation. So it's not anymore subject to the goodwill of a public authority of any government, but there is a legally binding instrument that persons with disabilities can invoke. The third point, and I'm mindful about time, is that society now is more aware about discrimination of persons with disabilities. So this is not really that there is no more the saying of we don't know what is happening. Like society now, with the inception of the convention and with the work of the committee and the work of civil society, society has realized what are the problems, what is the type of marginalization and discrimination that persons with disabilities have been facing for a long time. The fourth thing is that experiences maybe is very similar. The experiences of marginalization of persons with disabilities do not concern to them only, but it is a societal issue and an obligation for society to address. 5, that responsibility belongs now to the government at the local level, municipal level, but also at the national level, at the federal level. So it's different layers of responsibility where persons with disabilities should be respected in their rights. 6, there is accountability. So media, like policymakers, they now are accountable about the language they use when speaking to persons with disabilities or about persons with disabilities. They are accountable about the decision-making processes concerning adoption of measures, policies, programs concerning the rights of persons with disabilities, also media. So now any remark about persons with disabilities should be in line with the convention, should be coherent and should respect the parameters that the convention has set up. And the 7th point and the last point is the periodicity of public international forums concerning the rights of persons with disabilities. As Tara mentioned before, there were different processes at the United Nations, but now with the committee and the committee members being working not only during the committee sessions, and Ms. Fefoame would agree with me, but also intensively during the intersessional periods or when they are not in Geneva holding their sessions. This is really a permanent international mechanism working on the rights of persons with disabilities. So I think these 7 ideas are for me like the positive change. And for me, what is missing is really the attitudinal barriers. I think that is the greatest challenge that the convention as a legal instrument cannot really deal with. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. If we move on to the second question, similar to some of the questions we've had before, what advice would you give to deaf and disabled people's organisations in the UK as we start to prepare our next shadow report?
Thank you, Marta. And I would like to start just recalling what Ms. Fefoame mentioned about diversity and about being a woman from the global south for the first time in an international United Nations mechanism. And in that sense, I think the process of the CRPD alternative report is really an opportunity for organizations and the diversity of organizations of persons with disabilities to take part in an international process. So I would like encourage organizations of persons with disabilities now that they include the diversity of organizations, like organizations of women with disabilities, organizations of children and young persons with disabilities, but also organizations working on sectors and at different levels, especially grassroots organizations. I think one vital aspect of the first inquiry procedure of the committee that took part in relation to the State Party of the United Kingdom was precisely that the inquiry report was, the information provided to the committee was brought by grassroots organizations. And this really gave a lot of legitimacy and strength to the committee to move on this procedure. So my first point would be really to take into account and to ensure that all types of organizations and grassroots organizations are part of your process to consult and to develop the alternative report or reports. Also, organizations of persons with intellectual disabilities. In many state parties, persons with intellectual disabilities cannot join or cannot form their own organizations because they are denied legal capacity. And because of this fact of being under guardianship, they also cannot be part or cannot form their own organizations, or their organizations are not registered or recognized. But civil society would not have this legal problem, this legal obstacle, this legal barrier. So it would be an opportunity to encourage, to support, and to facilitate also engagement of organizations of persons with intellectual disabilities in this process, but also persons with disabilities who are in institutions, in different types of institutions, which the committee has received information they are really the most marginalized among the marginalized persons. Another suggestion from my side is that it is important to prioritize topics, because this is already the second and third periodic report. So the committee already had its first dialogue with the state party representatives. For the first time already listened from organizations of persons with disabilities about what was happening and what was like the situation in the state party. But now the committee needs to follow up also on priorities, on specific issues that really have not changed at all, or where the situation has become worse, or even like more violations can be documented. So it is important that as a civil society, you could highlight those aspects that for you as a civil society are more like relevant for the committee to address. Of course, the committee will analyze, will focus on like the whole convention, because its mandate involves the whole convention, but it also needs to have like a strategic approach to this review. So to really engage in questions which are like less general and more specific to the reality of England in this case, and the state party, the whole state party in 2022 or 2023 or 2024, or the year when the interactive dialogue takes place. But it is important if you could follow up like on the issues that were, of course, addressed by the committee in its first review, but also to bring your own analysis of what strategic and specific focus should have the committee for the second and third periodic reporting process. And also it is important to realize, and this is my advice, like to continue engaging at the national level, at the country level, with other stakeholders, with media, with also with other civil society, like human rights organizations, as you are already doing with Inclusion London, and also with independent monitoring frameworks, because while the committee can schedule the review of the UK, the adoption of a list of issues, it can take like years. Especially after the pandemic, the backlog of the committee has increased, and the reviews have been delayed. So it is important, and as part of the Secretariat right now, I'm in the obligation to let you know that the situation is really one in which the committee is taking several years before it can review the second and third report of state parties. And this is due to the fact that first the pandemic, which impeded the committee to to hold sessions and to hold dialogues with the state parties, but also because of the limited time to hold meetings in Geneva and conduct state parties reviews in person. I'm not sure if I have more time available or if I should stop here, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. And if you wanted to carry on, was there anything you wanted to say? Was there anything extra you wanted to add?
Maybe just one last idea.
Okay, yep, that's fine.
So that in your report, written report, and also in the discussions with civil society, you could identify who is the responsible authority to respond to that situation. And if at the national level you have any mechanism that could address a specific situation, and if it's working or not. So when the committee receives the information and when the committee makes a recommendation, it's a recommendation that really goes beyond to what it already exists. So it's not saying like the Ministry of Education needs to ensure inclusive education. Yes, we all know that, and they all know that. But what is where is the problem? What is that decision that the duty bearer, the Ministry of Education, just to put an example, is not complying with, that the committee needs to reinforce in its dialogue and in its message, its written concluding observations to the state party. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you.